WashingTECH.
This information is being used to surveil and incarcerate Black and Brown people at a disproportionate rate.
Welcome to the Tech Policy Leaders Podcast.
The world's most influential voices keeping you safe and informed online.
Streaming from Washington, D.C., America's tech law and policy epicenter. These are your leaders. This is the podcast.
Tech Policy Leaders with Joe Miller, founder and CEO of WashingTECH.
WashingTECH, safe and informed since 2014.
My guest today is Payton Croskey, visual artist and tech justice scholar, writing, coding, and designing a liberatory future for all who refuse to submit to technology's watchful eye. Pursuing a degree in African American studies and a minor in computer science at Princeton, Payton's research uncovers ways of designing digital systems that protect and empower targeted communities. Payton Croskey. Payton, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to this work at Princeton. And you're a rising senior, right?
Yes, I am. I'm a rising senior at Princeton. I study African American studies and computer science. I'm also a visual artist and designer who has, for a long time, been interested in the ways that targeted communities can invade and reconstruct surveillance technology and other harmful systems. And in my own personal research, I call this kind of form of resistance the augmented undercommons, where communities are building and fighting technology beneath the surface and creating technology with love, consent, and liberation in mind.
So tell us about your project here. It's entitled Liberatory Technology and Digital Marriage. You and your team put this together, and just so I'm not negligent about, not giving your brilliant co-authors a proper shout out, your colleagues on this are Kenya D. Hale, Amber Rahman, Anika Uden, Amandra Wright, Toussaint Webb, and Felicia Tucker.
Yes, all of these members of this wonderful team deserve all their flowers. This was a highly collaborative project from ideation to creation, and each person's contributions were invaluable. And the project was created and led by myself and Kenya Hale, who was a predoctoral fellow at Princeton University. And the illustrious Professor Ruha Benjamin connected the two of us, and we designed the project together.
So define those terms for us. What is liberatory technology, and what is digital marriage, and what is the central problem you've identified in this paper?
Yeah, and I'll start my explanation of that with the central problem that we're actually identifying, which is that most technology today track and store everything from links you click to the sound of your voice to your literal face. And not only is this an unsettling invasion of privacy, but this information is being used to surveil and incarcerate Black and Brown people at a disproportionate rate. So we created this project, and as a group, we wanted to fight back against these invasive systems and learn from community activists who are currently challenging technology's design processes. And as a team, we define liberatory as something that supports the increased freedom and well-being of marginalized people for this goal. And so simply making liberatory technology a tool, digital or not, and it accomplishes this task of freedom. And then we turn to marriage, which refers to the labored history of people fleeing enslavement in the Americas and the Caribbean. And these people who we can also call Maroons fled these enslavement and also formed communities amongst other freed people and also helped free others. And so the term digital marriage then refers to the act of liberating oneself and one's community from the restraints of our current digital society.
What is kind of if you were to tell someone who's never had any concept of being surveilled and just uses their technology and doesn't really even think about whether they're under surveillance, what is it that you would tell them that they're not thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of times when I'm describing this, especially to someone who's never heard of it before, I use the phrase of facial recognition and facial recognition algorithms, because that seems to be the most hot topic-y kind of term that's going out these days. And so think about it like this. You want to open your phone up with your face. You don't want to have to type in your password. So you use your facial recognition software to open the phone. It recognizes your face and your life has become much easier. But what we don't know oftentimes is that type of algorithm and that software is also being used by large corporations, by ICE, by local and federal police to become better at spotting you on the streets and identifying who you are when you've committed no crime at all. It's also become better at falsely recognizing Black and brown people when someone has committed a crime and they're looking for that person. There's all kinds of implications here that are happening from such a small act of just wanting to open your phone up without using a password. You are now feeding a system that is targeting so many communities, not just in the US, but across the world. And a lot of these systems are international. So when we're thinking about our idea for liberatory technology and wanting to find digital marriage, it's wanting to flee from this, not knowing where our data is going and what it's being used for, which is oftentimes very destructive uses. Instead, we are trying to find ways of evading this, kind of freeing ourselves from this restriction, meaning having more consent, more agency as users, and really knowing, where is my face going? Where is my fingerprint that I'm using to open my phone? Where is that going? Who is using that? And what are better ways we can kind of go about creating systems like this?
So describe what you and your colleagues did in this great zine you wrote, and then you had a GitHub link, I believe, where you've stored the resources you relied on to prepare this.
Yes. So for this project, which was about 8 weeks, we spent the first half of the semester kind of investigating different forms of technology, that being facial recognition, voice assistant software, social media, biometric technology, and so much more. And so we really investigated, what do those terms mean? How are systems being created within that umbrella today, currently? And then what are ways that they are affecting people in society? What are the unintended consequences? And how can we fight back against that? How can we rethink and reshape how we're creating this technology? So that was generally just a research focus, a lot of just long conversations with the team, going back and forth with new ideas of how to create a better voice assistant, how to escape the one that you currently have living in your house. And then the last 4 weeks of our project, what we did was, and I do want to mention that the first research portion of the project, we did accumulate all of that information onto a GitHub repository that now kind of describes all of the conversations that we were having about the pros and the cons of each type of technology we found, and how liberatory it was and what kind of things we might want to change in the future. And then the latter half of the project, we went in and decided as a team, what kind of liberatory technology would we want to kind of bring into the world. And so the research associates did a great job of just kind of brainstorming and using all of the key terms, ideas, values that we kind of accumulated throughout the first half of the semester, and then kind of created their own idea of what they would want, what kind of digital space they would want to see created.
Right. I'm looking at a lot of our listeners are really interested in online safety, and particularly for their kids. And I saw part of the work that you did on week 3 was talking about biometric technologies, and there's this infant optical scanning technology. Now, as a parent, that immediately sounds kind of scary, but you list some benefits to having this type of technology. Have you taken a position on whether this is something that do the pros outweigh the cons on this particular technology?
Yeah, we definitely do not think the pros outweigh the cons on the baby scanning fingerprint technology. Generally, just to explain as well, like when we say we hear the benefits of such a technology, we take it from not the angle of this is something that we're promoting, but something that you can say, why did this person create this? Well, the intended benefit is for you to be able to not mix up an infant after you've given birth at a hospital. And so that way there's no concern that you're going home with the wrong baby. That was the reason that someone created this type of thing, right? And so you can call that a sort of benefit. But that in no way measures up to the risk and the harm involved in tracking kids at such a young age. They're you can't even call them age. They're age 0 at that point, and we're already starting to track them. And that also ties back to a history, again, of there are infants, babies, not even 1 year old, who are currently in the system as someone to be on high alert for in police systems and things like that. And so when you have a baby scanning, a fingerprint scanning your baby, you are now putting them back into those systems who are now going to be watching them, afraid of what they're going to become, and they haven't even had a chance to find out who they are yet. So no, we do not endorse that in any way. But it is an interesting exercise for us to see something that we are so far against as a technology, but then allowing ourselves to kind of see, okay, what was the intended purpose of this? And then how can we get to that goal without using such a destructive technology? And then we began thinking about better ways of solving that problem of switching up babies in hospitals without having to track them throughout the rest of their life.
Are you worried about your kids' safety on the internet? We are here to help. WashingTECH's 5-step checklist will take you through the process of protecting your kids, and will give you tips on how to set up the best parental controls for your children on their devices. You want what's best for your children. They deserve to be safe online. Our step-by-step guide will help you make sure they are. Download WashingTECH's online safety checklist today to protect your kids online. Find it at protectyourkids.online. That's protectyourkids.online.
So I love this quote from Audre Lorde that you cite to in your project: the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And the context for this is the fact that most of the technologies we use, these so-called neutral technologies, can't really be neutral, because making them truly neutral, making them truly liberatory, would ultimately be against the interests of the people who created them, mostly white men. How do you think about this?
So the way we really think about this is essentially technology cannot be truly neutral, because we flawed human beings are the ones creating it. So everything we touch is influenced by our personal values, cultural upbringing, whether we like it or not. So that is whether or not you are a white man who is just reinforcing the systems of oppression that have benefited you your entire life, or even if you are someone who is trying to create liberatory technology, you are still instilling some sort of values into that technology when you create it. And so currently the so-called master's tools are social media platforms, the facial recognition algorithms I mentioned before, and a host of other systems that are riddled with biases that have been encoded from the developers. So rather than setting forth on this impossible task of removing all of our values and opinions from our creations, instead, as a team, we decided we needed to be intentional about what principles we want to encode in our technology. What do we want our technology to carry beyond us? Because no matter what, we're going to be putting something in it. So we need to make sure that what that is values of consent and communal wellness and well-being, rather than just simply neglecting to care about it at all, or trying to do the impossible, which is make it truly unbiased, truly neutral.
So what surprised you about what you all discovered during the course of completing this project?
Yeah, one of the most surprising things that still lingers with me to this day, as I mentioned before, each week we investigated a new type of technology, and we tried to find ways of seeking liberation from that technology. And a lot of times they were technological solutions that we were kind of on the hunt for. And namely the Voice Assistant Week, we found that there were little to no liberatory solutions out there. There were very few, and even the ones that we found, we still had so many problems with. And that really just left us realizing that sometimes the most safe and the most effective form of resistance is simply turning the machine off and chucking it out the window. one of the RAs, the research associates, Felicia, she made that point very clear during that week, how the low-tech solution was, in her opinion, the only solution that was worth talking about, because all of the other interventions really just reinforced or replicated the problems that we were trying to rid ourselves of. So that was really the most surprising one, especially as all of us coming in as computer science minds trying to come up with some technological solution, to realize that sometimes there aren't any, and sometimes we just need to get rid of this technology. It was very surprising, but I think it was probably one of the most valuable lessons we learned along the way.
Yeah, I tell my kids, they're 10 and my girls are 10 and 13. I tell them, read a book. If you read a book, you can go to any world you want and nobody will be able to track you. Nobody will know. Unless you're part of some crazy library system, God knows where. So now, what action do you think people should take after hearing this and going through your project and seeing what you've curated for us here?
Overall, I say on an individual level, I think it's always important to be mindful of what systems you're consenting to. When are you saying, yes, download all these cookies and sell my data? When are you opening up your phone with maybe some potentially invasive data? But I also want to stress the fact that this kind of problem, the problem of technology, the problem of the digital age, is not ever going to be, and nor should it be meant to be, solved by a single person on an individual level. So as much as, we might want to take individual steps in making sure that your phone is secure, your laptop is secure, I think the best way forward is always going to be in community. So that is finding your local or even remote organizations that are challenging the tech industry. This project was focused within the IDB Welsh Data Lab, which is a lab focused on looking at the ways that data and technology are employed for and against communities of color, and how we can really move forward and create a better future. And beyond programmers and web developers, we also need artists, we need sociologists, we need politicians, and so many more people to be informed about these problems, these efforts, and then also join in on with your community, your local activists, your local organizations. Like, trust me when I say that there is a vital role for you in this movement, and that there are so many outlets and so many resources out there. And if you want to start, I'd say go to the IDB Welsh Data Lab and go ahead and look at the website and browse some of the resources that we have. And I think that's a great place to start, to find an organization that speaks to you that you can get involved with.
We have so much work to do, Payton. Ryan Merkley was on the show last week and mentioned how long it's going to take to get to a place where we have a healthy information ecosystem. And we have the same challenges ahead of us here, navigating the surveillance superstructure that's, in a metaphorical sense, but really, at the same time, built on top of the foundations of slave quarters that we see at places like the Sully Historical Site here in Virginia, and these plantation tours they like to do around here. Instead of a cabin, we have like a force field around us that's been replicated by these technologies, going back to to that Audre Lorde quote from earlier. But what are some final ideas you'd like to leave with us before we close today? Something to think about between now and when we see you in a few years, after you've won a Nobel, a Pulitzer.
You're too kind.
Where can we find you online?
I guess the final thing that I'd like to say is, yes, the anti-Blackness, the roots run deep in this country. That is for sure. And I don't think that complete societal transformation, and the complete overthrowing of all these systems is the only time that we will ever get a chance to breathe, to laugh, to bathe in the sun, to feel joy. I think that there are many steps in between this process where we have that moment to kind of celebrate the promising future. There are social media apps being created. There are digital safe spaces, and so many more examples of liberatory technology that are coming out now or in the next few years that make me so excited to see what is going to come of this future, and when we all decide to kind of, move forward and change this direction. And with that means that there are so many problems of this digital age, but they do require a multitude of perspectives and solutions. But I can't stress this enough. It's so important that we take our time for users to reclaim their agency and build a better tomorrow. So don't give up, even if this seems overwhelming, and even if this seems like there's so many things that you're not in control of right now. There are so many organizations and activists and groups that are currently working right now to build a better tomorrow, and you can be part of that change. And so I highly encourage everybody to really find out who's next door to them, who is just an internet search away, to find out how you can be a part of this movement. And then as far as I go, you can find me on my website, PaytonCroskey.com, as well as on Twitter and LinkedIn at Payton Croskey. I would welcome anybody who has any further questions or comments or just wants to chat about any of this tech justice and revolution stuff.
Payton Croskey is a rising senior at Princeton. Payton, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
WashingTECH.